My parents are very independent. They carved out their own unconventional paths. And I think that was, again, very much enforced and, encouraged. Do your own thing, find your own way. Whatever it is, you can do it. It was like, okay, now it's my turn to find out what do I want to do. From a very early age, what I did know was that maybe I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I always knew what I didn't want to do.
When it comes to the spices, when were you introduced to that as a kid?
I want to say that I like spice, but I feel like it dulls a lot of other senses.
As you know, here on the Chef JKP Podcast, we love to push boundaries and discover the people who have made big impacts within the hospitality industry. The guests on this week's show used to have a small supper club for a number of years, then turning the concept into one of the best known eateries in the Middle East. On the podcast this week, I talked to Neha Mishra. We discuss her journey of becoming a chef, how ramen came into the picture, opening of the famed Kinoya, to then being asked to be in one of the restaurants at Harrods in London, and gaining international accolades. Neha really knows her stuff. She's ambitious and highly driven. It is also interesting to hear her points on people telling her that she was an overnight success, which, by the way, she really wasn't. She was grafting hard for quite some time to make the brand what it is today. A lot to dig into, so make yourself comfortable. Listen out for a story about Al Sakal Avenue. Time to rock and roll.
Hey, this is Neha. I am the founder and chef at Kinoya Dubai. If you like the podcast, make sure you follow, share, and subscribe.
Welcome back to the Chef JKP Podcast. And on the show today, we have an absolute legend within the chefing industry and has made her mark very, very quickly. I'm really excited to have on the show today the founder and the chef patron of the one and only Kinoya, Neha Mishra. Neha, welcome to the show.
Oh, hello.
So, as tradition always has it here, can you please tell me about your first or favorite ever childhood food memory?
Childhood food memory. I think my grandmother was an incredible chef, cook, and she used to, I remember eating really, just very, what's the word? Just very advanced food as a baby. And I remember as a baby just eating food that probably adults were eating. Like it's culturally in India, babies don't get different food from the rest of the family. You kind of eat everything that the family eats. Okay. And I remember being introduced to like flavors, like really intricate flavors very early. And I think that might be my first food memory. The second one is homemade ghee. And it's still a favorite of mine. I eat a spoon every single morning. My aunt used to make it at home. And because we lived somewhere really cold, it used to solidify. So it was almost like a fudge kind of a taste, like butter fudge. It was just, so it still remains to be one of my favorite things.
So what was the culture that you were sort of brought up in when it comes to sort of food and family and that sort of thing?
My dad's from Orissa, so I think a lot of like seafood, a lot of, just very, it's different. It's different from the north, whereas, it's where my mother's from. You have a lot more like meat and, it's different. India's so vast that depending on where you come from, you eat very different things. And because my parents came from two different places, I was exposed to very different flavor profiles and knew that there was a difference in where they came from.
Right.
But very, very quickly, I knew I loved the palette of the flavor profile of where my dad comes from. So again, seafood, vegetables, level of fermentation involved. Because back in those days, you had to, not everybody had access to fridges and, technology like that. So I think it was just very interesting. I remember thinking, as I was getting older, this food is very different. Even as an Indian, I remember reflecting back on the food I grew up on, going, okay, so this is not something that that's accessible all the time. Maybe that's where my interest for like something from the outside comes from, just that intrigue, because even within India, I felt like I was eating food which was its own niche.
But it's really interesting though, because India has, such an incredible array of food cultures within the country.
Subcultures, absolutely.
Right? It's just amazing. Every sort of 15 to 30 kilometers that it always changes. Right. But as a child in particular, was there a sort of go-to food as you were sort of growing into your adolescence that you were really into, or were you just into absolutely everything?
Absolutely everything. I think it was, I had such different influences, and we moved around so much that I feel like there was a lot of adaptability. And I think we moved so many cities that I was exposed to different food every few years. So your palate changed. I grew up in Kashmir. That was my first, outside of being a baby, I remember my first formative kind of food memories were in Kashmir. Kashmiri food is very specific. It's its own cuisine. And I remember thinking, this is a very different flavor. And then, we'd go back and forth and bounce back into somewhere else that we either was home or we were transitioning, moving to. So it was just flavors change all the time.
I think that's quite vast as well as a child to sort of, have all of these, you've got the sort of colder area where it's sort of stews and meats and that sort of thing. And then, of course, you've got the vast array of the fish. But when it comes to the spices, and what I'm specifically talking about is heat.
Yes.
When were you introduced to that as a kid?
I want to say that I think that heat wasn't that prominent in our household. It was more herbs and like if I think about like the vegetation that grows in certain part, like North India, I remember the smell. Fragrance is a big part of my childhood. Just how like certain leaves and vegetables and roots would smell, and I feel that's been really helpful because spice was secondary, which really has helped in maybe why I went into Japanese food, because for me, smell was more important than that kind of, like you have to smell. I have a very strong sense of smell even now. Like I can smell something different in a room or, in a tray. And that's always hit me more than spice has. I like spice, but I feel like it dulls a lot of other senses. So for me, as an Indian, weirdly, I'll indulge, but never at the cost of everything else that's on the plate.
Well, that's really interesting because, for some people, it's completely the other way around. They love to really put in the chili and really smash themselves with that, right?
Yeah, but you go into Japanese food and that's something that like it's so sensitive, right? The whole philosophy of this cuisine is just, it's sensitive, it's delicate, it's nuanced. You have to really tread so gently because if you go too fast, if you go too far, you'll miss something. So you have to really you can't go all in. And I love that. And I think that was my experience with growing up with food from my home as well. There was a lot of attention to taste this leaf, taste this herb, taste this vegetable, smell this root,
So when you were decided to sort of, after sort of high school, so on and so forth, was the natural path for you to go into food, or was it a completely different journey?
Oh, completely different journey. I didn't think, I think our generation, chefing comes from it's such a, you don't just become a chef, you study, you learn, you spend years and years of your life understanding this. So no, this was not an option. I loved cooking, but I didn't know that was something that I could ever do professionally. So you had to explore other things.
And what did you do?
To be honest, anything I could in the beginning. I left home very, very young. I was always very independent.
You say young? How young?
17.
Okay.
Literally, I think it was O-levels, kind of, high school done, and it was the next week I was out. left. I left.
And but you stayed in India, or you?
No,
decided
we
to
were
become-
here. I've been here for 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was here, and my parents were here as well. But I knew I needed to carve out my own kind of independent. My parents are very independent, very kind of, they carved out their own, unconventional kind of parts. They were musicians, which was not very conventional. That's not the path you take as an Indian like the 70s or 80s. But that's what they did, and I think that was again very much enforced and encouraged. Do your own thing, find your own way, whatever it is, you can do it. But yeah, I think I left home, and initially it was just like, okay, what now? You kind of the period in which I lived with my parents was very short. I only lived with my parents from the age of 11 until 16, 17. Right. Before that, I was living with, because my parents traveled so much for their work. It made more sense for me to live with more stable kind of family members. Not stable, but...
Sure, but like grandparents, uncles,
yeah,
aunties,
exactly.
things like that.
So I didn't live with my parents for a very long time, but the short time that I did live with them, I was able to understand that, these are very interesting people who have done whatever they wanted to do and took whatever path they were self-taught. So again, it was like, okay, now it's my turn to find out, what do I want to do? Back in those days, if you didn't have like the education, I couldn't go to university. This is something that my parents just couldn't. I mean, they could facilitate, but it would just be a lot of pressure for them to try and, make that happen. So
was it something that you wanted to do?
I mean, it was something that everybody was doing. And I think when you're 16, 17, you feel like you need to follow some kind of
routine or whatever.
Yeah.
Right,
and I think, but I knew that I couldn't put that on my parents. I didn't care about anything enough for this to become like a, it was a luxury to go to university. We were taught that. And you don't just go to, spend another 4 years figuring out who you want to be. You go out and you figure out who you want to be. You don't spend your parents' money figuring that out. That was something and my parents would. I know that they would be like, okay, we'll figure it out if that's what you want to do. But I just feel like I didn't want to put that on them. I didn't know enough of what I wanted to do.
So once you moved out,
yeah.
What did you?
So
what were you
immediately went into. Initially it was like working in a kiosk. Doing like selling little trinkets. There was a little Palestinian kiosk in Lamsi Plaza back then, and I remember just getting a job there and working that stand. It was very. It was a rite of passage. That's how you figure out. Like you do the time, you stand, you do a really mundane job that doesn't mean anything. But that was my first getting money from doing something I had done, and I felt good. It was like, okay, this is also a way to do it. And then after that, slowly I was like, okay, this is not something that I see myself in. I think from a very early age, what I did know was that maybe I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I always knew what I didn't want to do. So if I stuck somewhere, it'd be like, okay, I know how long I need to do this for. And then very quickly from that, I don't know, as things happen, I remember meeting a photographer, and I had real interest in photography, working his studio as, wherever I could, whether it was an assistant.
What kicked that off for the photography part? What sort of...
Creativity. Even before I left home, 15, 16, I remember my brother bought me a camera when I was 16, a Nikon, because I wanted to... I think I had National Geographics. My brother used to buy every now and then. And I remember thinking, I really love photography. Like, this is cool. So there was this, like, somewhere there was this creativity. And I was, I knew whatever it was, I had to be creative. Also, I was in a household where everybody was just doing something creative. My brother was, he was a self-taught audio engineer. He was, we had a fully functioning commercial studio in our house, in my brother's bedroom. My parents were musicians. This was a house which encouraged you to not seek 9 to 5.
Of that.
Yeah, no, it was incredible. I mean, there were musicians in our house all the time, whatever time of the day. You couldn't, like, you'd be looked at a little bit funny if you turned around to your parents and went, well, I want to go into finance. They'd be like, okay, that's weird, but you do you. They were just, yeah, it was a playhouse.
But I love that also. I think that's a real amazing way for, to spark the creativity of children generally, because we're
100%.
born with this incredible mind with imagination, so on and so forth, but to also have that and instill it within your kids, I think is so amazing.
Totally. And I mean, I don't know if my parents knew any other way. My mom was a little bit more like, she was a real boss. She would just like, get on with it. She had a routine. She was a boss. But my dad was a lot more, driven in terms of how passion fueled it. And every single day we were told, like, you can do whatever you want. There was no dream which was crazy. There was no idea that was too out there. It was, it was kind of like, well, why can't you? Like, if that's what you want to do, why can't you? And I grew up, and it's crazy because even something like that defies a little bit of logic. Even now, if you say to me, if I say to you, James, I want to do this, and you'd be like, that's a bit nuts. And I'd be like, but why? Like, that part of my brain really struggles to adjust to reality, because I feel like the most normal thing for me is to seek as crazy as you can go. If you want it, you go.
That's brilliant. So then when you got into the photography,
yeah,
you started working within the photography. Obviously, you were already creative.
Yeah, I mean, but then I very quickly realized that I was not technical. Like, I had my limitations, because I love photography, but I didn't want to work a camera. I didn't want to understand that. Like, it was just not my interest. It was like, so I liked behind the scenes. Like, I liked facilitating this environment for other people to be able to do this, hence production, later on. But that was a gateway into it. Like, I loved that world. It was fantasy. It was beautiful. Nobody in these rooms in a photography studio talks in other rooms, which I'd known where people were accountants and bankers. It was very different conversations, and I liked being in these rooms more. So I was like, okay, how do I fit myself into this? So it was very much like wherever you can. You don't know enough about any of this, so you learn everything and see where you can fit. And I remember Olivier, who was the founder of that studio, incredible man, had kind of taken me under his wing. He was like a father figure. And I think he just saw a very young, hungry, wanting to learn, don't want to go back to living with my parents, just want to be on my own. And he was like, okay, I'll encourage this. I'll figure out, and he would tag me along to his little, I remember at the time he used to do the Dubai Explorer book, and he was in charge of doing the photography regionally around. So I remember being a 17, 18-year-old kid, being in his car with him for 3 days, and just like looking at different landscapes of this country and seeing it from a photographer's point of view, which was amazing,
Wow, that must have really opened your eyes to so many things as well, like at such a young age.
For sure. I mean, growing up a little bit in India, I had always been very prone to like, adventure, travel, being in cars, seeing different, but India's landscape-wise is so vast.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much that. I think it was like looking at things differently. Like, I would look at him capturing like this bank of images for this book that he was commissioned to do, and how, what kind of thinking went into that. So I was always interested in how a business works, whatever your tool is, like whatever your outlet is, whether you're a photographer, whether you're a chef, whether you're, a painter, what is the business aspect of that? Yes, there's a creative aspect to it, but the business aspect of it intrigued me just as much. It's like, how do you make money doing something that you enjoy doing?
But how long were you working with him?
Contrast, I was there, I want to say, for a few years. I want to say like maybe 2.5 years. As a kid, that feels like a really long time.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was years, but I think it was in reality only 2.5 years.
And then what made you sort of pivot and move?
I think there was a level of, my role here is redundant. Like, I don't want to be a secretary. I don't want to be an assistant. I want to keep learning, but I don't know. I hadn't figured out what I wanted to extract, but I also knew it was just time to keep moving. So I learned everything I could from there. And then it was like, now how do I apply this to something else, something new, something I can be of more value? So I went and joined an image library. Back then, it was huge because I think early 90s, image libraries were huge. Advertising was huge. So there was, another aspect of that. And I remember working there again, just, selling photos to banks, advertising agencies, that kind of thing, to build up their library. Advertising had become such a big medium at the time that, it was a good time to be in that industry.
Especially for like glossy magazines as well.
For sure.
And all of
It was
that sort of
everything.
stuff. It was
Like
right?
everything. We weren't quite there with commissioning photography, but we were there with like relying on Getty and all these other, beasts to buy. And so it was nice to be in the middle of all of that as well.
So during that time, how were you involved with Saatchi & Saatchi?
Right, that happened a little bit later on. So it was very clever because I was working with these image libraries, getting to know a little bit about it. Obviously had this love for photography. And then I was working in an image library and, had a terrible boss, which I encourage. Every young person should have at least a couple of terrible bosses. They teach you everything you need to know about life. But again, I had to cut it out because I had bills to pay. Didn't have mom and dad, it wasn't that kind of thing.
Responsibility.
You had to figure it out. So I had to stick it out, but then I knew I needed to get out. This is crazy. Like, I can't be in this job. It's very dead end. I could also see like my future. I always had like, I could always, it sounds terrible. I could look at people from time to time and kind of go like an older version, 10-year version of myself. I could see myself and be like, is this where you want to be? And that's when I knew how quickly I had to get out.
Wow.
Yeah. Like there was a sense of awareness, like don't be there, And Saatchi happened because I found out advertising was huge at the time. There was a bar that they all used to go to, Shochos, back then. Beach villas, first villa in Jumeirah, Beach One, was Saatchi's offices. Then there was, what is it called? The hotel. God, it was my childhood. Anyway, where Shochos was. And I went in there and I was like, okay, I'm going to just sit at the bar, get a drink, and over a week monitored all these people from the agency coming in and out, and then eventually struck a conversation with the MD, had the courage to say, lied, said I was a producer, I was an art buyer producer, piqued his interest, and he was like, okay, send us your CV, we might down the line be looking for someone. And eventually send them my CV. The current job I was in, this is 6 months later, I was just getting progressively worse. My boss was just really hard to work for. And then the creative director of Saatchi & Saatchi called me and said, hey, you gave your CV to the MD, Robert Mitchell, and Ed Jones was the creative director, called me up and said, can you come in for an interview? I went in, blagged, said, yes, I've done this. Oh my God, of course. I'm so, so much experience. And he said, okay, you got it. You got the job. I was 21 at the time. Ooh. I told them I was 26. Lied about my age as well. And I remember the first thing they gave me to do was they had just won Qatar Airways as an account globally. And they said, okay, you produce that shoot, our global campaign. And so I did. I had never done that before.
At the age of 21?
Yes.
And never
20.
doing
I was 20.
Anything like that, ever?
Never. And this wasn't Google time. You couldn't just go and be like, okay, how do I do this job? It was
Hello,
like,
ChatGPT.
No,
yeah.
you couldn't. You really had to. I mean, I could barely work my way around in Excel. And I had to then sit with all these creatives. It was a whole creative department that I used to they were my children suddenly.
So you were running that?
Yeah, that was under the creative director, I was his art buyer producer. So everything, briefings in the morning, how do we produce shoots? What do we want from clients? How do we win accounts? How do we compete with other agencies and do a better job? All of that had to happen within I was sitting with these creative boys and girls, creative directors, who would be like looking at me going, okay, how do I do this? I have a vision.
So can I ask, were you aware about the enormity of that brand, as in Saatchi & Saatchi, and what they did and what impact they've had in this world?
I knew that advertising was big, and if you wanted to be in advertising, if you wanted to be affiliated in any kind of way, that was probably the best agency to somehow be affiliated with. So those were the only two things I knew. But again, this comes from this level of confidence that my father was like, you can do anything. Why can't you?
That is so amazing.
it's like literally in real life, that was what was happening.
So then, how long were you there for?
5 years.
5 years. So did they find out your age in the end or not?
They didn't,
Whoa.
They didn't. I think it was a little bit less than 5 years, but I was there for a while. I made friends for life, and
Right.
eventually, my best friends there didn't know how old I was until after I left, because I didn't want to put them in that position. But
Right.
later on, I said to them, I was like, like, I'm not your age, and they were like,
Yeah.
how, But it was there was a real survival instinct there, like I was.
But it's almost, I mean, you hear, especially in the UK, it's a cutthroat industry, Saatchi and Saatchi, they are monumental in that
For
world.
sure. And they were, and this was peak of, like advertising is what I want to say, like where we are with food and culinary growth in Dubai right now is what advertising was back then. It was booming. Like it had suddenly changed overnight, and everybody was like, how everybody understood the importance and significance of this industry. It was, if you were a photographer, if you were in any way benefiting from being like in that industry, you were doing well at the time. If you were a photographer, if you were a creative director, if you were a brand, I mean, everyone benefited from being in advertising at the time. And again, I think that was the first time I understood the value of a brand, building a brand. Saatchi used to have a logo, or like one of their key quotes, like slogans was love marks. And love marks are brands that exceed their value or what they actually represent. So like, what is a brand that you love?
For me?
Yeah, like,
let's say Michelin.
Okay, exactly. Or I mean, even something more like materialistic, like a Apple, right?
Yeah.
That's a love mark, because that you don't know why you're so like behind it, but you just are. You can't help yourself, and that just goes to show when community and people get behind a brand, it has a life of its own. And that was the first time I understood that. And not maybe 100%. If you think about years later, Story of Food, what was done with that subconsciously, subliminally, but that brand like love, how people support brands was very much behind that.
But throughout your time within those 5 years, I mean, baptism of fire.
Yeah.
What were the biggest lessons you took away from that company?
From that company, I mean, I learned everything I learned from there, whether it was the hustle, how quickly you have to learn, how rewarding it is to, I think what it taught me more than anything else, and I think this really applies to being a chef in the end, is that you can teach yourself really big skills. You don't have to. I had friends who were going to universities and they were, dedicating 10, 15 years of their lives to really studying something, which of course is, wonderful if you can. But I also learned that you can teach yourself these things. You can teach yourself anything you want.
Because also, I'm just trying to sort of compare the relative ground between an agency like Saatchi and Saatchi and, kitchens. The reason why I'm saying that is because your job, essentially, you were thrown into this job where you had to manage people, you had to manage your boss, you had to manage so many things at the same time.
Totally.
And you haven't even got a management style.
No.
You know what I mean? And then you've got people who maybe a bit older than you, above you, they know a bit more, but they don't want to say. And then you've got sort of the internal politics of everything.
And creative directors are like cooks. They are like your kids. So I was running like that kindergarten from a very early age with children who were much older and more experienced. I've always said this about Kinoya as well. When I started Kinoya, I was the least experienced person in my own kitchen. I'd done the time, but I'd done the time very differently.
Right.
So, being in that environment like Saatchi was very similar. I was around creative directors and, these people who are, they're so in their own kind of art and skill. But at the same time, they don't know how to, like, you have to be like, okay, move to the right, move to the left. You kind of still need to direct them.
And it's also, the corporate side of things as well, having to
Structure.
manage that, bureaucracy.
Being yes, and knowing when to say yes and knowing when to say no, having that diplomacy, it's life skills.
Must have taught you a lot of life skills.
Of course, and I was like 20, 21 at the time, producing a shoot for Qatar Airways. I still see it. I've still seen the photo shoot that I created, like I produced for Qatar Airways, and I was like, oh my God, how did they let me do this?
Did you, at any point during that sort of first 6 months of this particular job, did you feel the pressure at all, or was it something that you were like, you know what, I'm going to figure out whatever happens, I'm going to get it done?
You just do. Once you've said you're going to do it, then you don't second guess. You just go. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you're here. I mean, the thing starts with showing up and saying, okay, the minute I showed up for that interview, like I've already had those hard conversations with myself to say, you're going to do this, right? Like, when you're in your dead end job and you're being, you have this terrible boss, you're like, okay, if you're going to get out, then you can't like whinge about this. You got to just power through, which is what happened. So by the time you get to that step, you've already had that horrible conversation with yourself about pressure and what if you fail and what if you crumble. But no, I it went well. I
mean, it's just amazing. But then 5 years on, you learned all of these incredible lessons. You decided to move on.
So what happened then was, again, like every job I had done previously, I had realized that, okay, I'm the investment, I'm the value, I got to gain as much as I can, and then I got to capitalize on that. So 5 years in Saatchi means a lot. At that point, you got to now double your interest. You go somewhere, like, because, the great thing about being somewhere like Saatchi is that, yes, you'll do really well there, but where you'll really capitalize on it is now using that experience in other places.
Right.
So I had a choice. By then, I'd also become a very young mother. I had, by then, I'd taken a year, I had my first son. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to, at the end of Saatchi, I was like, because I'd worked really hard, I was like, I'm going to take a year off and figure out what I want to do. And at that point, of course, within the independent production agencies, I was good commodity. They were like, how do we get this person who has been running production in Saatchi to run our production for us? So I went from like literally somebody who knew nothing to, there was like a little bit of a bidding war going on about who can, who will hire me. So I could take my time and I'd be like, I'm going to sit on this for a little while and see who I can now work for and run their whole production. So I was going to production houses to run their production divisions.
And you were doing this sort of on a temporary contract basis? How did it work?
Yes, I went freelance first because I wanted to leave Saatchi and I wanted to just try and work for myself because I knew I could, and I did really well for that for a little while. But then I wanted the stability. I didn't want, like, production is extremely volatile in terms of, like, it's like being a freelance chef. You kind of, it works, it gives you your freedom, but then if you want to know, if you want to pay your bills, you got to kind of know. So by the end of that year, I was like, okay, great. I'm gonna start looking for something that's more stable. And then that's when I worked for the second, it was the only production. It was the biggest production house in Dubai at the time called Bareface. And I joined them as the head of production, and it was an amazing deal. I did that for a little while, realized that now I'd built more confidence, more credibility, and then I opened Caravan.
So tell us about Caravan.
It was just like I had always had this, and I say this to people in my kitchen now as well, or when I interview people for Kinoya, I always say to them, your 5-year plan better not be to be working for me still. You got to work for yourself. Like, if you're smart and you're entrepreneurial or industrial, you have to invest in yourself. You are your biggest investment that you're going to get back. And what had happened with Caravan was, as much as I'd loved the people who had given me the opportunity, whether it was Saatchi and then it was Bareface, was that I realized how much money I was making for other people. And I was like, why am I not doing this for myself? And it was really as simple as that. I was the front man. So I was, the one who was negotiating the deals, meeting the clients and all of that. So I was like, I don't want to steal what's like, I want to leave them with what I've built for them here, but I want to start fresh. I want to carve out my own thing. I don't want to work for anybody else. I know I can do this for myself. Even if that comes with like this volatility of, not knowing, I'd rather do it my terms than make anyone any more money now at this point.
So tell us about Caravan. What were the sort of gigs that you were responsible
it's amazing. For? I mean, I was, at that point, I started working with a lot of international agencies. So then by the time I'd opened Caravan, I'd been, it was clients like it was photographers like Peter Lindbergh, that I was working with Mario Testino. I was producing global campaigns for Givenchy, working with Art Partner, which is the biggest, production agency in the world. I mean, it was a different league. I'd transitioned. And I think that's the idea in life, is that, be where you are and be present in it, but transition, move. You've got to keep moving. And that was it. So by then, when you work with Peter Lindbergh, where do you go from there? And that's it. That's when it was okay, I'm done with production. I love Peter, I loved what I was doing, but then it was I'm always going to be the facilitator. I'm never going to be the center of creativity.
Yeah.
And that really did mess with me, because at that point I'd really realized that I have it in me to be creative myself. I had really fallen in love with food. I was doing so much of it in my own personal time. But, it was coming. You have to kind of listen to you, the little voice in your head. And I've always been very pragmatic as well. I'm not okay, I'm just going to pack it all in and just follow my dream. No, I was okay, do this sensibly. And listening to myself slowly, it was okay, production has served me so well. It's given me my life up until now. But I think I'm ready to venture into something that I want to do purely I'm responsible for, I'm in control of.
So did you sell Caravan Creatives or it's...
It runs. My husband is a photographer. So he still uses it for himself because, we both kind of started it together. It still does its thing. It doesn't do any production anymore. It's just purely for him to facilitate his photography.
So then what I wanted to understand is, in 2017, you started your Instagram account.
Yeah.
Tell me about the name first.
Oh, yeah. So what had happened was, again, Caravan was happening, and I was enjoying it. And I always say, leave the party when it's good.
Love that.
Honestly, just leave on a high. And Caravan was on a high. It was good. We were potentially at the time talking about selling it to, competitors. There was interest because there was a good database. There were real clients, but my heart was dipping out. And what I had done was, because I was in this job which was production is really taxing. You have to, especially the bigger the client, the more hardcore it becomes in terms of how, it's they treat it with a lot of, it's treated with a lot more seriousness than it deserves. Everything depends on it. It's we're saving lives here kind of thing. And that element of it was just I don't feel this way about it, but had to be done. And there were still shoots coming in. And what had happened was I realized that food was giving me more and more solace. I was cooking more and more in my free time. I've always cooked for as long as I can remember. Since I left home, I've cooked. But the seriousness in which it was giving me peace was changing. If I wanted to be happy, I was in the kitchen. If I wanted to do something for myself, I'd have friends over and cook for them. So food became this my personal outlet. And also because I was so starved of creativity in my working world, this felt like such an amazing outlet where I could just play and create, and nobody was telling me that I can and can't do it. It wasn't within any parameters of my life, my working life. And I remember sitting down with my husband at the time in the balcony. We used to spend a lot of time in our balcony in the evenings, and I remember saying, I want to make food. I want to start doing more food. And I was I'm going to start an Instagram account. And it's great because no one cares. No one cares about me. No one cares who I am. I can do whatever I want and it won't matter. And I wanted to be nothing to do with me, Neha, the name, I didn't want anyone I knew to find me. So it had to be a very, a nondescript kind of name. And that's where Story of Food came.
Brilliant.
Because it was just about food. And it was a story of food. I love talking about food. And so when it was formed, the beautiful thing about it was I thought no one would care. I would never be found out. I would just be the secret, black hole in the abyss. That
nobody would ever know.
Nobody would know.
So what happened? Because people did get to know. Because the other thing is, the one thing that was very prominent is that your love for ramen started kicking in.
Yeah.
When and how did that start to appear?
So, I mean, I was cooking a lot of food and, just purely for joy. I stumbled upon ramen. Because I love noodles and who doesn't love noodles and broth? Like, I don't even think that should be like a thing somebody says about themselves specifically. But, as people do, I love noodles and broth. And I was making pho a lot at the time. And then I remember thinking, well, ramen is interesting because it feels like everything to do with Japan is just it's just so difficult. It's so they don't gatekeep because we've all taken from Japan like in abundance. But at the same time, there's a barrier to how much we can understand about this extremely nuanced and intricate culture. So there was this intrigue. I was just like, what is this thing? Why does everybody make it like, why is it so hard? Everybody talks about how hard ramen is. Why is it so hard? Then I made my first bowl of ramen and I was like, this is nuts. Why is this dish so hard? Like, why am I getting nothing out of something that I've put time into? And then I became obsessed with it.
How obsessed?
Obsessed. It was self-possessed. Somebody said this to me the other day. Like, if you don't know you, like if they don't know me personally, and if you looked at my Instagram back in those days, the word she used was, you came across a little bit self-possessed. And I think that's true.
A lot of chefs are.
Exactly. And I feel like that was just... I'm so lucky I found ramen because not only do I love it, but to me, ramen is not like it's a very living, breathing thing for me. It's my relationship. Like, it's given me so much. It's given me Kinoya. It's given me security. It's given me possibilities for the future. It's this one dish that has changed my life, and I really love it.
But the thing I want to understand from you is when you went to Japan.
Yes.
How did that change the game?
Yeah, because, so what I was doing was I was making ramen, and only from what I was reading. And then it was like 6 months into, I was like, I gotta go. I gotta figure out like, what am I doing compared to what it's supposed to be? And to my surprise, I wasn't like completely off. I mean, I had a good couple of years of learning in there to do, but I wasn't on the wrong track.
Okay.
I also had bad ramen, and I think that was... I had incredible ramen that I couldn't even understand. And then I had ramen that was bad. And I was like, okay, I sit somewhere between this. I sit somewhere between the bad and the good. And I need to figure out how to get to the good side, But
for you, what are the key sort of elements to have a solidly, not amazing, but just a solid, good ramen?
I mean, okay, I think you can say this as a chef for any dish, but with ramen, you can't hide. Like you will taste the effort that's put into a bowl of ramen, and because ramen is very layered, it's broth and it's noodles and it's the protein. But what goes into those three different things is crazy. Like your broth can be as wild as you want to let your imagination run, and you should be able to taste those things. We have 7 different broths permanently on the menu right now, and every single one of them should taste completely different. That's the whole point. And I think what I have seen is that, people think that people don't know better. Chefs can't think that. They'd be like, okay, I'm going to put less effort and I think I'm going to get away with it. And you're not. With ramen, you're not. You taste effort. And at least for me, like every bowl I've had, whether it's in Japan, whether it's anywhere in the world, I've always been able to taste what the intention was. Mm. And I think with ramen, you really know the intention. With the noodles, with how much has gone into the broth, even your protein, they're such standalone things that each one of them is like its own little showstopper, and they all have to deliver on what they're saying.
Because the thing I found also is that if you are into, ramen, it's almost cult-like.
Yeah.
Because you really go into the depths.
For sure.
Of the layers and how to build.
For sure.
And, the consistency of the broth and the consomme and the flavors and aromatics.
Totally. And, it's one of the fewer things in the Japanese discipline, culinary disciplines, that does not have boundaries. You can. It's quite contemporary in the sense that you can freestyle. they allow you that. And I think that's why it felt not completely disrespectful to try encroach on that as a gaijin, because you're allowed to do that. You can't do that with sushi. You shouldn't. But ramen, yeah, you can make a crazy bowl. You can put a scoop of ice cream if you want, and they'll allow it. It's that nuts, you know? And it felt like, and you know, the reason why so many different ramen houses can exist is because every ramen master will make a ramen that is specific to what they love about a ramen. And I think that's why it can exist. So when people say to me, that to me doesn't taste like ramen, and I'm like, ramen tastes like whatever the ramen master wants you to taste, you know, and that's the beauty of it. It's not a cookie cutter. It's not like that's the thing you do. It's not kasasando. It's not a technique that's defined in its box.
And was there any sort of particular... So where did you go in Japan, first of all?
Everywhere. I went to Tokyo. I went for 10 days, and I literally, it was like breakfast, dinner, and lunch was ramen with like... and then I had to like squeeze in all the other things that I wanted to, you know, try out as well. But yeah, it was ramen. I would walk maybe some days 2-3 hours to like, you know, from one end of Tokyo to another, because somebody told me like, that's a very unusual ramen. And I wanted to try very different ramen. You know, I wanted to try like again, people forget there's the you know, the root, the birth of ramen is, you know, chinosoba. There are ramen that will still be very close to like the Chinese flavor profile of soup. And it's very important to try that as well, to understand how has that assimilated with Japanese kind of flavor profile over time. So for me, the intention was to have as traditional, conventional ramen as possible, and then as, you know, far out there anchovy ramen, or, you know, whatever, as different as it could be. And again, people will, you know, you can't get into that conversation with every single person, but people have their own idea of what ramen is. But if you actually truly ask a Japanese person, which I have, and they'll say, ramen is many things. It's so many different things. It's not just, you can't just say that's a bowl and that's all it needs to look like and feel like and taste like. So that was very encouraging as well, because I knew that as an outsider, I had some chance of, you know, making a iteration of it, interpretation of it from my point of view, and not be scrutinized for it.
But then after that sort of amazing pilgrimage, you came back home.
Yeah.
What was the plan?
Cook. But now really using key ingredients, like understanding ingredients, you know? It wasn't like where Japanese cuisine isn't, you know, it does have boundaries, it's like it's got its foundations, right? So you need to understand your dashi, you need to understand your, you know, which kombu, why. How do you want to incorporate your different elements? Like, what do you want it to be? You can't just... There were rules. There were some rules. And suddenly I knew those rules, and it was like incorporating them. Like, you can't have anchovy and mushroom. You can have one or the other. It was little things. And they were not like... And there wasn't great clarity, because these were conversation. These were like extracts. I would speak to one ramen chef, and he would be willing to give me a little bit of insight. So I would take that, and then I would go to like the fish market and try and get as much as I could. And they would give me a little bit of insight, mostly in Japanese, and then for me to decipher that. It was such a hard process, because nobody, like, there wasn't a place I went to and they were like, okay, spend 2 weeks here, learn it, go home. This was more like decipher, just understand everything you're eating, whatever you're hearing, and how the consumer enjoys ramen as well, and then try and take that home and make a bowl.
So you ended up coming home,
yeah,
cooking.
Yeah.
When did you decide to open up the supper club?
I didn't. It got decided for me. Yeah, it's crazy. So I was making it, and then so there was, again, food community was suddenly, you know, people were starting to talk to me and message me and go, again, you know, what's this obsession? And there was be back and forth. Chang was my first food friend. who was actually from the food industry and, reached out and would engage. And of course he had ingredients as well. And he was so kind because I was no one and nothing. But he was really like, look, we have a supermarket and we have access to Japanese ingredients if you want. So him and I talked a little bit more. And I remember eventually I needed an ingredient. I needed yuzu. And he had it. And I said, I'll come and collect it. And I went and sat with him and we talked for like half an hour. This was back in Barsha when his shop was back there. And we talked about it so much. And he said to me, and I said to him at the end, I was like, I have to make you the ramen. Like, we've talked about this so much. Come over with your wife, a couple of other friends, and I'll make you the ramen. And that's what we did. He came over. He was a stranger at the time with another friend. And it was 3 of us. This night went on till 4 a.m. It was amazing. And one of the friends that Chang was with, who also became a good friend, went and told his colleagues about it the next day. He worked at Uber. He was a creative director at Uber. And he went and told his friends at Uber that, I just had ramen at this Indian girl's house and she's really into it, blah, blah, blah. And whatever, he was obviously very kind because his colleague got in touch with me and said, will you do it? Will you do a dinner? I just heard through, I didn't know this person either. And I said, I won't do it in your house, but I'm willing to do it in my house. And so 12 people came. 12 strangers came to my house the following week. It was chaos. I'd never done anything like that. There was no timing to anything. The ramen was probably terrible, but they loved it. And they went and told other people. And it started with those 4 people that came to my house who told the other person who told 12 people. And then those 12 people became whatever, 7,000.
7,000.
Yeah.
Over 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal.
It is. And it was never, and I think my biggest thing that I'll say to anyone is don't have that much of a plan. Go with your gut. Like, this was such a free-flowing idea. All it was doing, these dinners, and somebody else called it a supper club. I didn't know what to call it. I was just like, dinners. All they did was they gave me the opportunity to just feed my outlet while I was still doing my boring job, which I was starting to dip out of. That's all it needed to do. There was never I'm going to do this for a living or I'm going to open a restaurant. It was just, if this allows me to make something like this once a week for strangers, then that's great. Then that makes it easier for me to go back to work and do my job that I don't really love at the moment.
So I want to go into 2 parts of this, Neha. So first of all, I want to know after the 12 people, you dissected everything. Obviously, your husband and the house or whatever was a mess, cleaned it down, and you were like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah.
How did you then start sort of getting bookings, and how did you set up a home kitchen to then be semi-commercial?
No, I didn't. It was literally one foot in front of the other. That's all it was. Because so what had happened was I realized that, okay, great, people do like this. This is, first, I need to keep getting better at what I'm doing. And second, I'm going to do this one day a week for now.
Right.
So I can still do my job. It doesn't take me away from that. But at the same time, I can really start focusing on this. And so I was using any time that I had that I wasn't working, learning, teaching myself. And then, people would it was word of mouth. People would get in touch with me and say, would you do a dinner? So it started one day a week, and then I changed it to 3. And
3 days a week?
Yeah, I mean, towards the end, I was doing it 5 days a week, 6 days a week. I was doing 6 days a week. And during COVID, I was so nervous once the lockdown.
Yeah.
I was so nervous. Once that had lifted, I was like, I got to really keep making money. That I used to do deliveries in the morning. So I used to wake up at 5 o'clock for deliveries that would be out of my house by 10 o'clock. And then I would prep for the supper club that would be happening that evening. And I would go to bed about 2, I reckon.
Yeah, so you had So Good Noodles, which was the brand that was sort of Deliveroo.
So I was doing that. And then I was doing the supper clubs in the evening.
And you were doing this alone?
Yeah, always. I always did it alone. It was only year 2 when I have a nanny. But she's a member of my family, and I was never gonna, and my kids didn't live with me all the time. I was a single mom at the time as well. And so she wouldn't always be with me. So it was only year 2 that she started helping me out with the cleaning. Up until then, the first 2 years of the supper club, I used to cook, clean, serve, tidy up. everything, every element of this, I used to do completely alone. It was year 2 where I was like, this is ridiculous. I need help. So she used to come and clean up. But no, that was it. And I remember serving, coming back into the kitchen, making the next course, cleaning the dishes for the next course. I mean, it was just, I don't know. It was madness how that all happened.
And it didn't sort of at any point sort of occur to you to get someone to come in and help you with the cutting or the cleaning and that sort of thing? Because the thing is, it's hardcore to do that in a kitchen, let alone your home.
Yeah, for sure. But this wasn't like this wasn't my side gig. At this point, this was my full-time gig, and it was money. Like, I was a single mother and I had to facilitate, like, I had to pay bills. I couldn't be hiring people to, no, there was any money that was going to come in from this was going to have to go in towards my life.
So who did the bookings?
Me.
You took the bookings as well.
Yes.
Okay, so if we take, let's say we're in year 2 of the supper club. You know the base, you know the food, you know the menu. So a typical day for you, take me through that.
Right. So typical day would be, I would wake up. It was early. Let's say we start with, I would make broth for 2 days. So it would be every 2 days that I would have to start again. So every other day I would be making broth.
So when you say broth, so people to understand, how many liters?
It would be, 20 liters.
20 liters.
Yeah, not a lot, but it was 20 people, right? It was 10 people a night kind of thing, or 12 people max. So that would be a 24-hour process. I would wake up in the middle of the night with an alarm to wake myself up to top up the broth because it would be on a hard boil.
Right.
So you would have to wake up every 4 hours.
So it's not simmering, it would be a rolling boil.
Yeah, exactly. For you to get that milky broth.
Right.
You have to. I remember there were times when I had to cancel a supper club because the gas would go off in the middle of the night and it would just be rotten by the morning, right? Because bacteria, nothing collects, yeah. So that would be my day. I would wake up in the morning, strain broth, first thing in the morning. So I want to say 7 a.m., strain broth, which would be an exercise in itself.
Yes.
It's hard to strain broth.
Yeah.
My team now tell me, they're like, and I'm like, yes, I know. 3 years, every other day I did this. And
be quiet, team.
Yeah, knuckles and all,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like squeezing as much broth as you can out of the meat, and how it, there was a smell to it as well, right? I remember it, just how
to get the gelatin out and all sorts.
All of it, and you can't lose any of it. So that would be the first thing. That would take me up until probably, I want to say 10.
Right.
And then it would be the rest of the prep. So it would be an 8-course dinner. So it would be prep for the karage, the marination. It would be the other things. It was preparing the menu.
And the veg would come from outside, right?
Yeah,
okay.
It was all commercially bought. I would buy the fish. So if I was doing the clam, so there used to be a clam broth as a starter. So if I was doing that, I would have to go and buy that in the morning every day, fresh. I mean, my supermarket were like, what do you do? Every single day. I was buying everything commercially as well. So that and the steak and all of that. By then, I mean, some things would come in deliveries, but most things were bought. So I would say about until 1, I would be prepping. And then I would do the table, iron every single serviette. I remember standing on in my dining table, ironing every single napkin, folding it, doing the table. It was quite meditative. That part was I'd fallen in love with how much of a devotion and process this was. This was my life, and I really had a lot of respect for the fact that I had to do it all. I had a lot of, that gave me confidence in knowing that maybe I could do this one day because I was doing so many elements of this. And then my kids would come back from school and I would spend some time with them.
Yeah.
My kids were really amazing about it because for 3 years they couldn't use their living room, really. They were amazing. And then 7 p.m., that's it. Everybody,
Showtime.
That's it. Yeah, people would come and it was really good. It would end by 10:30, 11-ish most, and I would clear up everything. I remember my dining table wasn't big enough for 10 people, so I used to have to bring the little table from my balcony inside And at the end of the night, I would have to take that back out again because I didn't like my house to
Sure.
look like,
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
like it wasn't supposed to look like. So yeah, there would be, and by most nights, by 1:32 is when I would go to bed.
I mean, just for people to put it into context, I mean, to do that almost every, by the end of it, 6 nights
Yeah.
a week, that's dedication. You're talking very serious amounts of man hours.
Totally.
The reservation. So you were literally a one-man band.
Yeah, and I would
right?
have to also do my own marketing and PR and all of that, like make sure that the hype was there, process and everything. I had to, and this is so crazy because now when I take a step, like when I'm able to just take a minute or take, a couple of days off, or I feel guilty. But then I feel like, because I forget that time, I'm just like, oh, look at you now. Like you just like life variety. Why are you taking it so easy? But I forget that, like, and so many people say this to me. They're like, this was a very overnight thing for you. I'm like, no, it was not. It was so much work for so long with no restaurant or anything in the pipeline. You know, it was just, you just kept going.
So when we get to Kinoya, you opened in 2021.
Yes.
April. When you went through the various meetings with all of the different investors.
Yes, I was a serial investor data at this point. Like I knew how to vet at this point. And I think that in itself is a very, very important skill if you're a solo agent looking to tie yourself to someone, because it's a marriage, it's a relationship.
But they would come to you during sort of the dinner. Oh, we'd like to discuss the possibilities of opening together, so on and so forth. How would it work?
It was a bit of both. There would be some people who would be doing it post dinner, like once they would come to the dinner. The other thing I always also did was I never researched anyone before they'd come to my house.
Right.
I'd never, because I didn't want to know. I wanted to treat everyone the same way.
Very smart.
I didn't want that pressure, and I didn't want the guest to feel that I was treating someone more differently than them. So I never researched. So it would be like later on, somebody would be like, hey, I came to your dinner. I'm so-and-so. What do you think? Do you want to meet? And I did meet some people. But, and I always say with investors, it's a 3 meeting rule. First time is always, you will hear what you want to hear. They're trying to seduce you a little bit. By the second meeting, the penny will start to drop. By the third meeting, you know exactly who you're going to get into business with. So I'd done this a few times, and I knew who I wanted to. Like I said, maybe I didn't always know what I wanted, but I always knew what I didn't want. And in terms of a partnership, I didn't want a complicated, I just wanted meeting of minds. I wanted somebody who understood the vision, because creatively, I wasn't going to let anybody. I was finally going to do it the way that I felt that was going to work, and I didn't think there was room for 2 visions in that. We both had to have our roles. You are the infrastructure, the investor. You're putting your faith in me, and my responsibility is to now make sure I do good on that for both of us. But the vision can only be one person's, because it gets too diluted, and that's where friction starts, and you stop having fun.
Yeah.
So I kind of knew that. And then eventually I met the right person. I mean, I'd met him, my partner, I met him 2 years before we actually decided, but the timing wasn't right. And I didn't have the confidence at the time, because he said to me the same thing at the time, saying, look, whenever you're ready, I'm ready. I want to do it with you. And I remember thinking, I need to understand more. And that's when pop-ups started happening, because supper clubs were one thing, but the other thing was pop-up. Pop-up was 110 to 30 people at a time that I would prep for alone, completely alone. And I would pack my car to these gigs, to these restaurants, and like pack up my noodles, my induction, everything, and that would be the back of my car, ready to serve 130 people. I would do that, and I would pack down my car at the end of the night when the pop-up was done, and come back home. Once I knew how to do that, I knew I could do scale, because I knew there was a lot of imposter syndrome as well, right? So I was like, how am I going to say that I'm a chef if I can't cook for more than 10 people a night? So once the pop-ups happen, I started building that confidence, knowing that, okay, I can do this as well. So when I met my partner, investor, you know, at the time I had just started to like venture into doing pop-ups, so I was not ready. So when I met him 2 years later, timing was perfect. I mean, it took us 15 minutes. We met. He said, look, anywhere you want, whatever you want, wherever you want, I won't interfere. And I said, give me a day to think about it. And by the time I was in my car, I'd already messaged him going, let's go. And that was it. It was a 15-minute, in the end, these 3, 4, 5, 6 years had just summed up to these 15 minutes of making a decision.
Because also, I think what I want to also understand from you is that once you did the design, kitchen, all of that sort of thing, walk me through the first week of service for you.
Oh, I mean, the thing is, you've done this, right? You know, like this, everything prepares you for the next thing. And because it's so gradual, the build of a restaurant is so arduous and so like you're like your blood and sweat is in it. And one of the other amazing conditions was that, you know, my business partner said to me that it's all yours, but you really got to do it all. Like you see it through, you see the build through. We're not going to hire external, you know, we're not going to get our architects or our interior designers we're not going to pay them a fee to come in and oversee it. You see it. And so I was there every single day of the build. Adrian was there for a lot of it. Most of it. Yeah. If I was there, Adrian was there as well. And Adrian really helped me with understanding so much of it because he came from crazy hospitality background. But a lot of it I just had to figure out. And I used to sit in where the ramen room is, where it was just cement and like pipes and, you know. So by the time 9 months into this, you're ready to cook. You're ready to see your kitchen turn to, but nothing prepares you for what is about to happen. Nothing prepares you. And also, I was very nervous because there was so much hype built around the brand, Kinoya, everything to do with me, that I was like, this can end really badly. I can really, really, really tank. Like it can bomb so badly. But, you know, we did it. We carried through. First week was hell. We opened.
Why?
Volume. We did not anticipate what was coming. I knew it was going to be busy. And I knew that, you know, initially I knew I was going to get a buzz. I was worried that buzz was not going to last, but I didn't know what that actually meant in practice. And neither did the rest of my team, by the way. They were like, yeah, well, I mean, how much does the community like this girl? Like, how bad can it be? You know, like, it was like the phone, we knew phones would ring and we knew people would come. But even the team, who were seasoned F&B people, they were like, I remember my supervisor at the time, we didn't know each other that well. First day, because I'd given them a bit of background briefing during the training time, going, this is, you know, how it started. It was a supper club, blah, blah, blah. But they had no context because they were like, you know, coming in from another restaurant. They didn't know what I'd done. And I remember the first day when we opened the reservation lines, she came back and she said, who are you? Like, what is this? What is the deal? What is the story? Why do people really want to eat your food? Because the phone wouldn't stop. Our phone broke. Like, I remember we had to put a thing out saying our phone has busted. At Salat, we had to call them up and say, our phone line has crashed.
Wow.
It was nuts. It was really beautiful and it was nuts and it was very scary.
Problem to have, though.
It was queues and like 300 people showing up, day 1, day 2, day 3, getting mad because we couldn't facilitate. Lines weren't working. People saying crazy things like I'm doing that as a PR stunt. I was literally just trying not to bomb at this point, you know? So from a service point of view, again, we had anticipated a number. I remember getting to the first day of service and my sous chef saying to me, both of us just sitting in the back, just looking completely distraught. And he looked at me and went, Chef, we have no more broth. And I went, what do you mean? He said, we have no broth for tomorrow. I said, we cooked for 3 days. He said, we have nothing left. So I slept. This was a whole, like literally no sleep, me and him, the whole team. And I remember going, okay, calling my husband going, can you get me some, like a mattress pad to Kinoya and some pajamas? I remember me and him putting broth on. He went home. I cooked broth all night. I went home at 7 a.m. He took over to quickly go change and come back to the restaurant. And that's the first week. It was that.
And how many covers is the restaurant?
70. 77.
And so obviously lunch and dinner, or it was open throughout that time.
Yeah.
And people were just coming in, boom,
Yeah.
boom,
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we still do, but it was a good 350 covers a day. For a person who's never ever run a restaurant, it was, and you're trying to, you can't crumble at this point. You got to keep your shit together. So it was really like a lot of mental kind of workout of like, okay, keep it together.
But you know what this reminds me of? Reminds me of you in such a beginning.
For sure.
It's almost the same kind of like boom.
For sure. And I also had like these incredible people. They were like, like these are my family. That's why I think every chef agrees that yes, it's really nice to see your comrades and like, your fellow chef people in the business, but your team is it. Like your team is everything. They carried me. They really carried me. They carried me when I couldn't, like when I was just at like a breaking point of I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And they were like, no, it's fine. Let's just go. And they also, they look at you because you're at like the helm of, you're their leader. And so you also have to keep it together because if you start losing it, it's a sinking ship. So it was, we did it. And my son works at Kinoya London at the moment and he's very emotionally invested in his role there. It's supposed to be a temporary thing, but he's very invested. And, he says to me, whenever things are slipping there, he'll be like, Mum. And I'll be like, you have to remember the first year of a restaurant is just, we all forget. It's such an emotional roller coaster. There's so much to fix. There's so much to do. And you almost cannot judge a restaurant in its first year. Like you got to give it. As chefs, we know this.
Absolutely. But the other thing is, which is now it's phenomenal because I was really thinking when I was writing down my questions, when I was doing all of the research. And then 2022 comes along.
Yes.
And then not only it comes along, but it comes along fast. You're named in 50 Best.
Yeah.
You're in Michelin Guide.
Yes.
And Go and Milo. So the triple whammy.
Yeah.
For a person who has not had necessarily, let's say, formative chef years.
For sure.
And at the same time, done a supper club, never ran a commercial business.
100%.
This, for me, I was really sort of taking aback and sort of thinking like, this is exceptional what you did. And I agree with you. It's also obviously you have an amazing team, but it's now listening to you, it's about having that will to push and to push and to push. When you received the news about all three, because you said, you had this imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Did that imposter syndrome go away?
No.
Because it's amazing. Neha, this is what you've done with this little beautiful restaurant. I have to, hats off.
Thank you.
Because it's really incredible.
Thank you.
So how did you feel about
that? Great. I mean, obviously, my mother always says to me, don't sit in any feeling for too long, whether it's a great one or it's a terrible one. She's like, you got to move on from it. And I think it was, 50 Best was amazing because it was one to watch. And it was also like, I'm so grateful for it because, you kind of like, everything works. I think restaurants or people's luck in restaurants it's such a thing. People don't talk about it enough. You could have the most outstanding restaurant, product, blah, 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 everything else, but something just doesn't work. And in other times, it's like the perfect storm. Everything comes together just for you. I remember looking at Kinoya and Onyx and my partner and Adrian at the time saying to me, I was standing there and I was like, this is it. I'd seen so many locations and they both went, are you sure? Because this is on you. If this tanks, you're choosing this location. I was like, I really believe in it. And there are so many different elements that happened that made it work that I can't really take credit to say, I get it. No, it's just so many things need to work for these things to happen. So one to watch, yes, of course, it helps with the imposter syndrome, but my whole team did this. We built Kinoya, like every single person's effort has so much to do with, like, from a service point of view as well. Everything has made it what it is. And Michelin, of course, with the bib, it's crazy because, like 20,000 restaurants in Dubai. Is it 19 that have a bib right now, currently hold a bib?
There's not many.
There's not many. And, you think to yourself going, there's certainly people that deserve it more than I do. I know that. But I'm here and I'm going to just do the best I can to honor what's been given. Like you can't, I don't ever sit in that and go, okay, great now. Now it's like, well, no, really, like make it worth what you've been given.
But it's honestly, like, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It's been, hearing it's been such a sort of wild journey. But what I think is really important is that people don't seem to understand what you just said, that it was not an overnight success.
No,
it was graft and
it
graft.
really was. And people say this to me all the time. What crazy success story. And I'm like, it took so long. And the month when Kinoya was, we decided, my partner and I remember, because it was the pandemic, Supper Club had to shut down overnight. So my source of income stopped overnight. I was a single mom at the time, and I was like, how am I going to do this? I had to, for the first time in 30 years, think, maybe I have to leave Dubai. But does that mean separation from my kids? I didn't have money. I can't even explain how quickly it turned and how it could have gone so differently. I could have just been sitting in India right now trying to do a supper club, and none of this would have been a reality. So I think your luck also plays a big part in it. Right time, right place, right people. And of course the hard work. But the hard work was immense. Like, there was so much of it.
But then tell me, if we fast forward another year, how did the partnership with Harrods come about?
Yeah, people don't believe me when I say this, but literally it was a DM in my Instagram.
They were just like, hi.
Yeah, pretty much. I literally, and it didn't even go into my regular DMs. It went into my requests. So,
right.
And every now and then I check that just because, it's work or whatever. And so I had a DM, and it was like a regular day, and it was just like, hi, this is so-and-so from Harrods, and love your restaurant, been there. Would you be interested in coming to Harrods as a concession? And I remember sending it to my business partner and Adrian going, what? This is not real. And
it's fraud.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's a scam.
Exactly. It's so weird because, again, it's like echoing this manifestation. And I really believe in manifestation so much. But I have always said there's this thing about department stores and ramen shops, right? This is the most iconic department store in the world.
In the world.
Yes. And I mean, it's a much more luxurious experience than that, but still, it's a department store. It's the most iconic. And to have Kinoya in there, for me, this is so full circle. It's crazy. So it was a no-brainer. It was what it represented, because to other people, it's like, it's Harrods or whatever that means to them, right? But for me, Harrods is the pinnacle of what ramen shops in department stores has been. You never have to you don't have to say it twice to someone. Go, where is your restaurant in London? And you go, Harrods, and they go, oh, you never have to say that twice, which is an amazing thing. So when they got into, so basically what had happened was, they'd been in town, the Harrods team, the F&B team had been, from what I think, if I'm correct, they'd been here for 50 Best. So they were doing the rounds. They came to Kinoya, they loved it.
Very sneakily came in, obviously.
And because we don't have a PR, we don't work with PR, we don't have a PR team. We're never privy to anyone who's of any kind of, we should know about coming into the restaurant, which in a way is a blessing, but we do miss a lot of this kind of information. It doesn't fall on our radar. So he said, we love it. Would you consider it? And up until that point, of course, ramen to London is what Indian food to Dubai is. It's everywhere. The city knows it. And I was like, really? Is my ramen good enough to be in London? But then it took somebody like the head of, F&B in Harrods to say to me, yes, we love your ramen. We think it's better than the ramen that we have tried in other places. So we want you to be here. And I think sometimes when you can't believe in yourself, you have to take someone else's word for it. And I had to just go with that. And yeah, so then Harrods happened and I had to, stay quiet about it for a better part of 9 months.
How?
Because we went back and forth. Because it's our standalone. A lot of people are, there's some confusion about, is it a franchise? Do Harrods? No, we are a standalone. We are Kinoya still the same two partners who operate out of Harrods. And we're a concession. We completely control it. And it's been wonderful. I mean, optics-wise, I don't need to.
Huge for the brand. I mean, it makes you a global brand.
Totally. And it's been received really well as well. I mean, London is the toughest thing I have ever done. Just when I thought, Dubai, opening a restaurant for the first time, it's going to be hard. London, literally, it humbled me to a point of, it taught me two things. One was, there was a level of recognition that happened with Kinoya Dubai that, I get a certain amount of love and respect within the community in Dubai. You go to London, nobody cares. I am no one there. And I was looking forward to that because that was just about who are you without any of that? Can you make it work? Is your product still good? That was one. And the other was just the hardest thing I've ever done. It's crazy. It's hard. It's running a culinary school because it's so hard to find people that want to work, that can work. So yeah, but now I can say, and I always said to my business partner, when we went into it, I said to him, if nothing else, I want to be able to say, I know how to open a restaurant in London. And I know. I'm the least experienced person in the kitchen now can say, I know how to also open a restaurant in London, which is what a learning, It's
an incredible feat.
It's
really, and the other thing is that people who think London is great and all that kind of stuff, they don't tell you that the foodies in London are also psychotic.
Totally.
They really know their food.
Totally.
And if they love you, they really love you. But if they hate you, they're going to tell everyone.
They are.
Everywhere, all over the world. Yeah. And they're going to make sure that you know about it,
Absolutely.
So it's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not.
But I think the fact that the team from Harrods specifically, came to you and they put all of their faith in you goes to show what a phenomenal product Kinoya is.
For sure. And I think we needed, but also there's been like a lot of kindness from, I was expecting, and I said this to everyone in the team, I said, get ready to get absolutely annihilated. Like British media is not kind. It does not suffer fools. It's just it's gonna kill.
Yeah.
It's gonna go for it. But we had so much kindness.
Okay.
It was crazy. Weirdly, better response than Dubai initially from a media point of view.
Oh, very good. Okay.
No, I was massively polarized in my views here. People loved me or they hated me here.
Right.
But London, kindness, so much kindness. Wow. I'm so surprised. I was looking for the opposite. I was prepared for the opposite. I knew I was going to get murdered, but no. I mean, it comes in waves, obviously, but at large, and these are serious people who've come to Kinoya London. And also, my confidence had taken a bit of a hit from the media point of view in Dubai in the beginning. I got a lot of hell for it in the beginning.
And did you get hell because of the food? Was it because of your background or not
everything? There was a lot of when it was positive, it was like, but look, she's done so well for someone who's never done this before. It was like that kind of thing.
Right.
Or it was just like, no, this is not Japanese food. This is not ramen. This is not Japanese ramen. It was a lot of that's how I feel about it. I'm very convicted in how I feel. And that's how I'm going to stick with it. And
it's probably those same people who frequent the restaurant now.
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think people have been very. Dubai's a funny one. I've come to now. I can compare the two markets and say what works here and what doesn't work here. And you got to stroke a lot of egos in this business to get to certain places. And I didn't do that. And I don't regret that.
And you don't need to do that.
No, I don't. But, as a result, there was a lot of I remember just not being able to digest food for the first year of Kinoya opening because I just felt so physically sick. There would just be these views coming from everywhere. And bear in mind, again, this is not something that like I wasn't equipped for, you know. I was still extremely green. You know, I'd never done a restaurant before. This is someone who was like, I love ramen, I'm going to make ramen, to like literally people going, that's not ramen. That's not how you make ramen. That's not how you do it.
Well, that's the thing is also like, so, and you were not taught, again, because you didn't have this sort of chef's background, that, you know, a dish came in, you got critiqued, so on and so forth, and you sort of like, you know, went, but this is proper, like people coming in and, you know, saying, because they're really opinionated, and that's where it goes back to the cult side of things, you know?
For sure, people. And I mean, I think the minute you're making someone, you know, the minute somebody pays for something, they have the right to have a view on that. And they did. And I don't think that's incorrect. I think anyone who eats your food, they're not wrong and you're not wrong. You can both stand in that. But it's you build a skin. You do. And now it's funny because what it did was after 6 months, a year, especially now, if somebody has something really negative to say about the food, I want to sit with them and I want to be like, tell me why. Like, what do you like? I want to know. Why do you feel this way? I no longer look at it as, well, you're wrong or whatever, or, you know, like let it get to me that in that way. Now I'm just more like, why do you feel that way? Like, where is it better? Let me go try that.
But I think if it's done from a constructive perspective, if it's done from a constructive point of view and they have really valid points.
Yeah, 100%. I want to know.
I mean, you know, I'm like, okay, good, I got you. But if it's somebody who, no offense to any accountants or finances, for example, who have nothing to do with food, they know nothing, and they're just saying, I don't like it because I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, get out.
For sure.
That's just
for
me.
sure. No,
but
of course. No, I know. You can't. I mean, I had to like, you know, identify who are the people whose palates I trust, and like I will take your opinion, like chefs that I love and they're friends of mine, and if they said to me, hey, you know, this is, I'd be like, of course, all day, tell me. But you know, but this is a learning.
It's your business. It's
is.
your reputation. So you want to know if something is going on or if something's off, so on and so forth, right?
And you know what? Weirdly, you're not going to be completely honest, you're not going to find out exactly the quality and the consistency of your restaurant from the one-time blogger. You're going to find that from your everyday customer.
Right.
I go to, if I can see, you know, one of my customers who's been there, who I know comes 4 times a month. If I see him, I will make sure I spend time talking to him and say, how's it going? What do you think? Is it the same? Has anything changed? You know, because he knows.
Right.
He pays for this and he comes 4 times a month, once a week. That kind of thing. So you kind of learn to see, where do you want this from? Like, and yeah, it's.
So then, you know, you've had a lot of different challenges with the supper club, running the business, so on and so forth. But for now, what are the future plans for Kinoya? Do you want to expand, or do you just want to carry on, you know, doing the very best that you can do and keep pushing to other levels?
You're a chef, so you know this. Like it's you want, like, there's this constant battle between just, I want to just craft this more and more and more and more, to I want to do so much. And you're always like walking that line. With Kinoya Dubai at the moment, there's some things I want to do. We've retained our bib for another year. Which
Congratulations!
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful for that. And not for thinking that we deserve more or anything like that. Just for my own personal growth, I want to try and elevate things a little bit more within Kinoya. And I think I am going to do a smaller, like a more. I think I want to. The one thing that keeps coming back, Chef Himanshu was saying this to me at the awards. He was saying, you know, we just need a version of your supper club, and that hit home. And I think there is there's something about that. There is something that I want to, within the bigger universe of Kinoya, I want to like have a little tiny room or experience there which replicates what it was. You know, so maybe I'm going to work on that a little bit, which requires time and attention. But I think that's like something I want to prove to myself, that can I do it? And then, of course, I want to expand a little bit. I'm looking into markets where we want to be. You know, we never, ever expand for the sake of it. We do it because it's somewhere I want to be and it feels purposeful. So I think the next Harrods happened because it was the right decision.
Yeah.
Whatever happens next has to be the right decision. We're not in a rush. I'm someone who wasn't able to pay my bills not so long ago. So I'm in an okay place. I'm okay. I'm not, it doesn't need to happen fast.
So Neha, we've now come to the quick fire questions.
Oh, okay.
All right. So probably this next question is the hardest for all of the chefs to answer. Always. Maybe not so in your case. Let's see. Favorite ingredient?
My favorite ingredient, kombu.
Kombu. Because?
It's just so beautiful. It's so delicate. It's like the backbone of Japanese soups.
All right. Pickled or spicy?
Pickled.
All right. I'm going to put you on the spot here. So I'm going to apologize in advance. Shawarma or ramen?
Ramen. I can't.
Right now, in this very space, what are your top 3 cuisines that you love to eat?
That I love to eat. Japanese, sadly. Japanese. It's so sad. It's always just Japanese.
All the time?
Pretty much. But I mean, I'm really into heritage Indian cooking right now as well. Heritage, because I've been spending more and more time in India, and I just think that like my own roots are becoming very, like, it's coming to surface.
Yeah.
Like I want to address it a little bit more.
Oh, cool. Exciting.
Yeah, so just how vast and, rich our own culture is, and how much, and there's similarities between Japanese and, in its simplistic form, Indian food as well. I think I'm really obsessed with, and I think because I'm looking into kind of doing the supper club version in Kinoya, I'm really obsessed with different techniques and different times in Japanese cuisine. So there's like different times within the cuisine, they've harnessed and developed different techniques. And I'm really, really like, I'm a hyper-focused person. So like, I like to go into like really like niche of like, so if it's Japanese, it's not the wider Japanese. It's like, I want to go into like more specifics.
I love it.
Right?
I love it.
It's just, and the world is so big.
And the
like
technical aspects of this.
And you can't like, I also feel like if this is like my life's kind of devotion with Japanese food, then I feel like there's so much to explore there that
history.
It is. My business partner said to me, because I'm going to London soon, and he was like, Neha, please try and get a sense of London this time. Don't just go to Kinoya. And I said to him, I don't even have a sense of Dubai. I only have a sense of Kinoya even within Dubai. Like,
right.
It takes so much for me to pull myself away and go, like if I'm not eating at Kinoya, my next move would be to like, let's go to Kohante and have lunch there, because I want to know what's happening in the spectrum and that, in the universe of Japanese food all the time, because you have to.
But he is right, though.
Yeah, I know.
He is right. You should take a little bit
I really
of time.
want to.
If of course. Next one. Who would you say are your top 3 culinary heroes?
Culinary heroes. Look, I love Ivan Oken because of what he gave me with ramen, right? Like, he was the god of, making a ramen understood to gaijins. Love him. Love him. Then, everyday heroes. Like, I think, like,
They don't need to be chefs, by the way.
Oh, then my father, big time. He has taught me everything now I know about, like, food, guts, will, perseverance, that kind of thing. And then I think I really look up to the chefs within our community, like whether it's, I love Himanshu, I love Chef Rahul, not Rahul, Avatara.
Yes.
It's Rahul, right?
Yeah.
I just think, and I think especially like Indian chefs putting our cuisine on a map and, changing the interpretation of what people think Indian food is.
The narrative as well.
Totally. Love that.
Now, from your years, whether it's in the supper club or whether it's in Kinoya or somewhere else, what would you say has been the funniest kitchen incident that you've either seen or been involved in? And if you don't want to, you don't need to name names.
No, okay, from the home, from supper club, this is funny because my nanny Nanda and I were talking about this the other day. I was using my oven so much during the supper club, and it used to go 24 hours, right? Because of the power would go off in the middle of dinner.
No.
Like literally like there'd be a trip, so we'd have to go to the main box and like turn everything on. So in the middle of dinner, which is funny now, but it was so awkward at the time. But people were so kind.
Yeah. At least the setting is at home, so it's like, oh, it's okay, don't worry, and everyone's chatting and all that kind of stuff.
But then I did a pop-up at Maison 15, not Maison 15, when they used to be in Alsacal, you know, the warehouse. I did it outside that, and 130 people showed up in the morning for their tickets, sold them the tickets. Pop-up was going to start at 1 p.m. Fired. Literally, just there was a full it just caught on fire, like the socket. And we had no power. So we had to get Alicia at the time from 1004, really good friend. She happened to pass by to say hello. 130 people have paid, they're waiting, and I have no power. I have nothing. I have no running water. She went and quickly bought 4 inductions. Not inductions. You know camping.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we cooked for 130 people in 4 camping stoves. Wow. And washed at the back. I mean, it was. When I say I can, if I have to, I'll make ramen anywhere, and I will. I'll do it.
Well, what are your predictions for the dining scene within the region?
I think more homegrown. I think it's just going to keep coming. I think there's this another wave of like chefs who've been like working hard, grafting, and doing their supper clubs or whatever it is. I'm really excited about AJ. You know AJ?
Yes.
I'm really excited about him. He's just opened his little place in
Motor City.
And I feel like he's going to do great things. And more of that, just more of people who've really just been waiting and grafting.
Well, look, the other thing I wanted to, specifically for you, what advice would you give to supper club chefs who are looking to open their own restaurants?
Yeah. I always say the supper club was great for, really testing a business's viability. For a really long time, I think 2 years in, people will tell you if your food is good, they'll say to you in the beginning, you should open a restaurant. But you got to wait. I mean, see if people still say that to you 2 years after running the supper club, 3 years after running the supper club, if you still have people who want to book. Because if anything, I found the supper club was such a good case study for if you should open a restaurant. Because for a really long time, my whole theory was, yes, this is great, but it's 10 people a night. You can fill that. How are you going to fill a whole restaurant? And, run it like a business. Don't really start running it like a business model, as opposed to just something that just facilitates like it's not there to tell you that you're a really good chef or a really good cook or you can cook really well or your food's really tasty. Understand your business. Does it work? Like, do you have growth in this? Do you have longevity in it? So I think case study. You have it. And I always say Instagram or social media at the moment, like the reason why Kinoya has survived without a PR hand is because we have the ability right now in our world to hold communication for our own brand. Like I can communicate anything I want through my Instagram about my brand. If I want to know if a guest wants a certain dish more than the other, I can find all these. You have the tools, so really use them. Because I really do, part of me believes that no one will understand your brand better than you do, but you really have to study it. Like, I remember when London opened, and I knew I didn't have the time to do our social media as well. So for like a month, I hired somebody to do it. They were great, but they will never understand your tone of voice. They will never understand your messaging like you will. So you really have to, like 360, understand your business. And the biggest, I think, what I've seen in some really incredibly talented chefs as well, is that you can't just be a chef if you want to have a restaurant. You have to be a business person as well, because that will only take you so far.
Yeah, and that's not easy to navigate.
No, for sure. Really? But, that's... in the end, it is a business.
Absolutely.
And
the final question. Can you give me, what would you say to your 16-year-old self? What advice would you give her?
Oh, Trust your gut. Trust your gut. Trust your gut. It's not let me down once.
So, Neha, if not everybody's following you, but they wanted to get hold of you, how can they do that? Which social media channels and which handles?
Story Food.
Story
For
Food?
me, yes, Story
Perfect.
Food. I manage all our social media accounts, all of them.
Also,
Yes. So, if you are trying to find anything about Kinoya,
boom,
you'll find me in one of them.
done.
Always.
So look, Neha, first of all, I want to just recap what we've discussed because it has been amazing. From your childhood memories to the different regions of India.
Yeah.
It's been amazing, to your education growing up, to then 16, 17 years old, wanting to go out into the wider world and doing your own thing, to then going into photography, spending time around the country, and
For sure.
it was amazing, to then advertising spaces, Saatchi and Saatchi, which I think was such a huge baptism of fire, but you smashed that. Then, you went on to keep pushing forward, have your own business, which did really well, to then that pivotal moment of 2017, a story of food. Then the Ramen Obsession started.
Yeah.
To then the sub club's 7,000 people in 3 years, which I think is amazing. To then, 2020, pushing us in even more forward into the landscape, and then finally Kinoya opening in 2021. Then the triple whammy of Michelin Bib Gourmand 50 Best, and then 2023 Harrods. And to now, it's really been such a phenomenal journey, which I think is going to keep pushing and moving forward. So on behalf of the Chef JKP podcast, thank you so much for coming in.
Much.
Keep inspiring us, keep pushing forward, because I know you have a hugely amazing, bright future ahead of you.
Thank you.
And really, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. Big fan. Can't wait to tag people on Emirates. I'll be tagged. Thank you.
What a conversation. Can you just imagine turning this small supper club into one of the best restaurants on the dining scene? If you haven't tried ramen at Kinoya, you are missing out. It is a thing of beauty. She has worked so hard, and it is not easy road to open a restaurant for any hospitality professional. But imagine just doing it when you're not even in the industry. I genuinely admire Neha's work ethic, as well as what she has achieved. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's around the corner for her and the brand. It's conversations like this that can really open our minds and think about the entire ecosystem of hospitality. Doesn't matter if you're a chef, a waitress, or not even in the industry, you would have been able to learn something totally new. If you want to see more of what Chef Neha is doing, I'll place all of the details in the show notes. And don't forget that you can now watch us on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure to follow, share, and subscribe. I would just like to ask a small favor. If you like the show or think someone you know could learn a few lessons from the guests and the conversations we have, please share it so that we can reach as many people as possible. And who knows, perhaps these episodes can inspire someone to take action and be the very best at what they do. Finally, a big fat thanks and muchas gracias to you for staying on and listening to the entire show, you absolute legend. Until next time, food is memories.